I'm sorry. I know I feel like a teacher up here. Please lower your voices. I'm sorry. Yeah, I know. Eyes on, 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. Everyone. No, I'm just teasing. Just teasing. Well, welcome everyone. We are so excited to be here. It finally feels like spring has sprung outside, and I hope your gardens are receiving the extra TLC that they need this time of year. A couple things. Tonight, we are going to be having the incredible Heather Bass speak to us about gardening for bees in North Texas specifically. So that's what we're going to be talking about this evening. We are joined online from a bunch of people joining us from around the country, and for those joining us online, we are so excited to have you. We'd love to hear in the chat below. If you have any questions, go ahead and type it out. We'll ask Heather at the end of the class for you. And of course, we'd love to hear where you're tuning in from for those joining us online. We are going to start with a few really quick announcements before I lose your attention, although I know you're very excited about bee trivia tonight. We had a lot of fun writing the questions. First off, 'tis the time for irrigation evaluations. Now, if you are a City of Fort Worth resident, the city will actually pay a licensed irrigator to come to your home and do an evaluation on your sprinkler system. At the time, no repairs are completed. However, we will be able to get your sprinkler watering the correct amount per zone, per bed, however your property is designed based on soil type, all of those factors, your pressure at your home. It is a personalized service that will keep you guys in compliance so you don't have to hear from our enforcement team in this year, which is the goal. So if you are interested, we do have flyers, or Tracy or I would be happy to get you signed up for that. Next week, time really does fly. On April 18th, I, myself, and my very spirited 5-year-old daughter will be hosting a table at the Wedgwood plant sale. We would love to have you guys come. Not only will we be tabling at the event and giving away some really cool promotional, water-saving giveaways, but I can personally attest to the plants that you can, purchase at this sale. I bought some plants for my 5-year-old last fall. They were black violas. We purchased them at the beginning of October because they were spooky and fit the season. Those things, I cannot kill them. They are still there. they have been covered in snow. They have gone 8 months without being watered, and they are thriving. So I highly recommend joining us at the Wedgwood plant sale. If you'd like to swing by, it is a lot of fun, and you can get some great stuff for your yard. So do consider joining us there. The flyers are on the tables here, and we will post the information for those online. For the first time ever, we are joined by Melissa Aceves, and the City of Fort Worth, in partnership with Fort Worth Water, has planned, and we will be presenting our first ever fully Spanish water saving seminar with Miss Melissa Aceves, who's in the room next week. So we would love to have you guys there. I am thrilled to announce that I'm going to have to increase the amount of tickets for the event. This is fantastic news for both Melissa and all of our at-home gardeners. Melissa is going to show you everything from upcycling products in your home that you can use to create your own mini greenhouses, to using things around the house to upgrade your garden outside in ways that you might not have thought about it. Little does she know that the cantaloupe she gave me a couple weeks ago have been growing in my mini greenhouses in my house to give away to you guys at that class. So if you're interested in lentils, cantaloupes, I've got basils, a little bit of dill. We're not really talking about the dill. And some other options. We'd love to have you there. You guys will be leaving with lots of new goodies. We will be making our own hydroponic little seed starters with Melissa. So anyway, I do have the information available for those in class, and for those online, I will also be posting a link to come here to the Botanic Gardens in the same room at the Brit to join us for that. We are so excited for that. Okay, I think I've hit all the big ones. Okay, now the moment you all have been waiting for. I know you have waited 3.75 weeks. I know you have been doing your bee research. I know you have been studying the thousands of species from around the world, because you know if there's one thing in this world Heather loves, it's a North Texas bee. So, so we do not have our ducks tonight, so we're just going to rely on a very old school system of please raise your hand and we're going to try to call on you. For my volunteers at the table, I'm going to need you guys to pay attention to the class to help me figure out whose hand presumably went up mostly first. We're going to go with mostly first, okay? So with that being said, we have a 20-ounce Arctic tumbler available tonight. We have 2 of these as options for our winners. And we also have, I have 1, but I've changed my mind again. Let's do 2. Pelican 40-ounce tumblers with our A Little Dirt Never Hurt Fort Worth water logo on it. So these are what you guys are competing for. So get your hives warm. Get your honey ready, because Susan doesn't want to be on TV. Thank you, Susan. Because we're going to be starting with question number 1. Where do honeybees usually live in North Texas, meaning physically? Where do you find a colony or a bee in North Texas if they're not being raised in a man-made hive? What is an alternate home for a bee here in North Texas if it's not a man-made hive? Volunteers, Susan? I need a little bit more than just a point.
I would say white shirt, but they're both wearing white.
Okay.
With a pencil in her hand.
I'm going to give it up because I think she went before I did.
Okay.
She's before.
You sure?
She was ahead of me.
Okay.
Called on me, but she
Heidi, do you want to go? Trees is one of the answers. We can absolutely do trees. It's also the ground. The ground, we're going to talk a little bit about bees in the ground, which is why we need to talk about some of our pesticide use here in North Texas. So congratulations, Heidi. Would you like the Arctic warm mug or the Pelican tumbler? These are a mouthful. There we go. Wonderful. Congratulations, Heidi. There we go. Okay, for question number 2. If you've started your word search on your table for those in person, you will have at least 1 or 2 of the answers. But there are 3 answers to this one. I can't give you everything, y'all. All right. How is a honeybee colony organized inside of a hive? Specifically, can you name the 3 main ranks or positions of the bees who operate inside of a hive? Pink.
Queen, carpenter, and worker.
We're so close. We're not quite there. Okay. There we go. We got it. Queen, carpenters, and drones. Good job. Congratulations. Would you like the 40-ounce or the 20-ounce? Congratulations. Wonderful. All right. Next question number 3. This is a species question, and as a former zookeeper, you know I love a good animal fact. So, what is the most well-known bee species that is used for honey production? Honey production here in North Texas. It's a very specific kind of bee. Yes, honeybee is right on the money. However, I need you to be a little bit more specific. What continent is that honeybee from?
North American.
Hang on. No, it is not a North Americanos honeybee. No, but close. Yes, ma'am, in the back here in black?
Yeah, European.
European honeybee. There you go. Good job. Would you like the 20-ounce tumbler or the 40? You want to come up and grab one? The tumbler, there you go. All right, and our last question, and you are going to get our Arctic warm and cold mug. This is my favorite question, and if you think I didn't spend a lot of time in the parent pickup line today Googling videos of this with my 5-year-old, boy, are you wrong. How do honeybees drink water without drowning? This is important, and I'll tell you why in a second. Heather's laughing. Yes, sir. They float, yes, but they use a specific body part. They have a very specific body part that not all insects have.
Well, I'm going to pass because I don't even know what to call it.
Okay.
I know what it is.
I will accept the common name of it if you don't know the scientific name.
I'm good.
Okay. Anyone in the class? Yes, ma'am? It's not the snout. Great guess. We're in the right realm, y'all. We're getting closer. You have one of these. I'm just telling you. The tongue is correct. Now, specifically, it's called a proboscis. Don't Google it unless you want to have some dreams tonight. Let me tell you, it's funny looking. But that is a very important question, and I'll tell you why, but I don't have the flyer with me all of a sudden. The city, specifically Tracy and I here, are teaming up with one of our new partners for a free cup of coffee on Monday called Mental Health Mondays, where you can drink coffee made with fresh Fort Worth water at Casa Azul. The coffee's on our partners, the PSP or Dream Big organization. They are a mental health organization. And for an hour and a half, we are going to be making our own bee drinking stations that you can paint and take home with you. So you get coffee, a craft, our friends at Dream Big, and Tracy and I. So if you'd like to come have a free cup of coffee with us on a Monday, I know it's really going to throw you guys off. We're a Thursday group through and through, I know. We would love to have you for Mental Health Monday. That's going to be May 4th. Star Wars Day from 8 to 9:30 a.m. at Casa Azul. So we'd love to have you guys there to come make some bee crafts with us. Again, and you guys will remember our bees, how are they going to drink our Fort Worth water? Using their tongues. Excellent. We taught you something. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get Miss Heather's mic turned on here. Excuse me. Always. Okay, thank you for always putting up with our ridiculously silly trivia. We appreciate those in class here. Let me get to Heather's intro. If you guys could please, for those of you who are in the room with us, we do, oh, I'm sorry, who said tongue, by the way? Forgive me, I'll bring this over. Forgive me, I'm so sorry. For those who are in the room, if you guys could just please double check your cell phones before we get started. We do want them on silent if possible. There are restrooms and ice cold, clean Fort Worth water located in the lobby just outside. If you need to go stretch your legs at any point, you're welcome to. For those joining us in the room, if you grabbed one of our brand new 2026 aluminum cups, they will actually change color when you put that ice cold water inside of them. And yes, they are dishwasher safe on the top rack, just so you know. So we're super excited to offer those. For all upcoming seminars, remember you can always come talk to Tracy and I. We have these amazing QR codes for those in class here. For those online, we will post a link to all of our upcoming events, everything from Melissa's class next week to coffee with conservation on a Monday, so for Mental Health Monday. So we're excited for that. Remember, you can follow us online on Facebook at Fort Worth Water. On Instagram, our handle is SaveFWWater. And on X, formerly known as Twitter, we are FW Water. Tonight, we have the amazing Heather Bass. Heather's a water conservation supervisor at Tarrant Regional Water District in Fort Worth. She has a master's in environmental science and earth sciences, and a bachelor's in biology with a focus on conservation and restoration of natural systems. Heather has conducted research on rare Texas plant populations, sustainable landscaping practices, prairie restorations, and the effects of climate change on ecosystems. As I've said in the past, she doesn't sleep, I'm pretty sure. Her duties at TRWD include managing their outdoor water conservation projects and increasing awareness of conservation landscaping practices like we're doing tonight. Heather enjoys gardening with native Texas plants, thank goodness, and spending time in nature, also thank goodness. And so without further ado, we are thrilled tonight to welcome Heather Bass.
Thank you. Thank you for being here this evening. Before we talk about bees, like she said, I'm from TRWD, Tarrant Regional Water District, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about TRWD. You can see our missions there on the screen. This is our service area that you see on the map there. You can see our lakes, our 4 primary lakes here. There are other lakes that we also help manage or deal with, but these are our 4 primary lakes, and those big orange lines that you see going across the map, those are huge pipelines that we use to pump water from those lakes that we have over in East Texas, the Cedar Creek and Richland Chambers, and we pump it back up to the Tarrant County area. As you know, in East Texas, it rains a lot more here or there than it does here, and we just don't have enough water in the lakes in our immediate area to provide water for the large population that is here in Tarrant County. And so our part of the water system, we build and manage the reservoirs. We build and manage the pipelines. That is all raw surface water. We then pump that raw water over to the cities like Fort Worth. They take it into their drinking water treatment plant. They treat it to drinking water standards. They pump it out to all of our homes and businesses. So our Fort Worth customers are you guys. Our customers is Fort Worth and all the other cities there in Tarrant County. And I'm here today talking to you about gardening for bees because I'm going to be talking a lot about planting native plants to support local pollinators like our beautiful bees. But I want to just talk a little bit about the importance of water conservation. This is just a sample of 1 year of our pumping at TRWD. And you can see it goes January to December, right? 1 full year. You can see when we're down here in January, February, March, that is our baseline water use. That's our necessary water use. That's when people aren't watering their lawns, right? So this is all of our bathing and our washing our dishes, drinking water, all of that, the necessary things that we need. And then that big jump that you see, that is what happens when everybody is watering their lawns during the middle of the summertime. So sometimes during the summer, 60, 70% of our water use is all going to people watering their outdoor lawns. We have the population here in Tarrant County is expected to double in the next 50 years. We just can't keep sustaining at this rate. That line that you see there, that's the most that we have ever pumped in one single day. 619 million gallons pumped in one day in August. And most of that went to outdoor irrigation. And you heard Kelsey talk about the sprinkler evaluation program. When it comes to this large water use, most of it is due to automatic sprinkler systems. And unfortunately, sometimes 40, 50% of that water is wasted just due to the inefficiencies of a typical sprinkler system. Yeah, I think a lot of us have those neighbors probably, yeah. So that sprinkler evaluation can help make sure you're not wasting that water that is coming out of your sprinkler system that you're paying for. And so SaveTarrantWater.com, that is our water conservation facing website. You can learn about our programs. You can learn about resources that we have. We've got a calendar of events and classes just like this one. We do some amazing stuff. There's a lot of things coming up in the next month or so. We're going to be at a lot of Earth Day events. So take a look at our calendar. Come see us at an Earth Day event. We've got videos, all kinds of good stuff there. And then we also partner with other organizations, so the Tarrant County Master Gardeners, the Native Plant Society, Texas A&M AgriLife, other people that have similar goals as us. All right, so we're going to talk about bees now. Let me just tell you what we're going to go over today. We're going to talk about, I know that our trivia was about honeybees, but we're not going to talk about honeybees. We're going to talk about native Texas bees. She said, you know, you got the question, right? They're European honeybees, right? And so we're going to talk about, right. No, boo, yes. So we're going to talk about native Texas bees. Now, sure, a lot of the things you might plant for a native bee, a honeybee is also going to like, you know, but we're going to talk about native bees. So we're going to talk about why native bees a little bit. We're going to talk about what are native bees? What am I talking about when I talk about native bees? We're going to talk about a few native bee types, but native bees are so diverse. I mean, we could talk about types forever, so I'm just going to go over some of the main types that you might see. And then we're going to talk about how to support those bees, how to create bee habitat, and then we're going to talk about some plants that you can plant to support bees. So, just starting out, native bees are not honeybees, right? Honeybees are not native. Like she said, they are European. These are the bees that produce honey. They're eusocial, meaning that they have those ranks like she was talking about. They have a society that they live in, right? Most of our native bees are going to be solitary dwelling bees. They live in a hive, right? And they also sting. Most of our native bees do not sting. And honeybees, you know, they can be deadly for people who are allergic to bees, right? And it is a common allergy. So we're not talking about honeybees today. So let's talk about native bees. They are diverse and beautiful. So we've got more than 4,000 species just here in North America. So there are a lot of different native bees that are out there. Most of them do not sting. Some of them, and it's kind of like a complicated subject because something like a bumblebee, for instance, you can get stung by a bumblebee, but typically it's only if you're like messing with them, like if you grasp them with your hand or something like that. Some of them don't have stingers at all. Some of them do have stingers, they just don't use them, or they're not even if they tried to sting you, they couldn't get through your skin or they couldn't sting you the way that a honeybee does. Most of them are solitary. There are some that are eusocial, or there are some that live in hives, but most of our native bees are going to be solitary dwellings, so they don't have a hive like your typical honeybee. So just briefly, we're going to go over a bee life cycle. This varies a lot. There's a lot of variation in the beautiful diversity of bees that we have, but this is your basic bee life cycle. We've got our little egg. Usually they are going to lay that egg on a clump or a ball of nectar, not honey, that's honeybees, nectar and pollen mixed together. And so they'll lay that egg on that, and then that's what the larva is eating when it hatches from the egg, right? So you get the larva stage, which is like little worms basically, and then it goes into the pupa stage, and then it goes into the adult stage after that. Some native bees overwinter in the pupa stage. Some of them are overwintering in the larva stage. Some of them are overwintering as an adult. So they do different things depending on what type of bee it is. So we're going to talk a little bit about a few of the common native bee types that you might see. Mason bees. And I love the titles that they've given these bees because they really describe a lot what they're doing. So a mason bee, like you might think, is doing some masonry, right? So it uses mud to basically build its little brood cavities, right? So it's going to get into some type of crevice, maybe a stem, maybe a hole in a piece of wood or something like that, right? And it's going to take mud and use that to create cells that it's putting its little eggs in and its babies and everything. They are used in commercial farming, so it's not just honeybees that are used to pollinate in commercial farming. There are a lot of native bees that are used for that. A subsection of these are the orchard bees. They're used in orchards. And some of them you see are not native, so there has been some imported from Asia for those farming purposes. So not every bee that you see that isn't a honeybee is native necessarily. But so we've got our mason bees here. Then we've got the sweat bees. I love these because a lot of times they're metallic. And that metallic look is it's a beautiful bee. People say they're attracted to perspiration, and that's why they're called sweat bees. I'm not sure if that's true or not necessarily. Maybe they are. I've never seen it myself. Most of them are ground nesting. Some are nocturnal, or the vespertine, which means they come out like at dusk. And they can be eusocial, so some of these can live in a society. Then we've got our leafcutter bees. So these guys, as you can see in the picture here, they cut a portion of leaf and kind of make like almost like a little burrito type thing that they put their babies in, right? So they might go into a crevice and create their little leaf burrito, put their baby inside, and it's doing its thing inside there. These ones, they store their pollen underneath their abdomen. So a lot of bees, you will see the pollen like on their legs, right? You'll see kind of clumps of pollen on their legs. These, it's underneath their abdomen. So you can always tell it's one of these because their habit is a little bit different. When they get on like a flower, you will see them kind of lifting their butt up and down like this. And so they're putting that pollen up underneath their butt. All right, then we got mining bees. These carry their pollen in their armpit. It's not necessarily their armpit, but it's kind of like the underside of their arm and the side of their abdomen there. So they carry pollen in that area. Most of them are black and white, or I mean, not really black and white necessarily. It's more like kind of like dark with some light tan or whitish colored hairs. Some can be very specific. So some bees will gather pollen and nectar from a bunch of different types of plants, a bunch of different types of flowers. Some can be specific, and they really only like one genus of flower or one family of flowers, maybe one specific flower type. And of course, like I said, I love the names, mining bees, they mine tunnels, right? So they are going to lay their eggs in the ground. They're mining tunnels out of bare ground or sand areas, and they make those tunnels and put their little babies down inside the tunnels. Then of course we all know bumblebees. These ones you can always tell because they're super duper fuzzy, right? Super, super fuzzy. There's about 9 to 10 different types in Texas. In this area, there's probably about 5 different types that you'll see, but a lot of times you'll just see the common American bumblebee, which is the one that you see there, I believe. Some of them will have a little bald spot on their back, and so you'll see just a little black dot, basically. Some of them have that. They nest in the ground under vegetation, typically. So usually they'll get under maybe like a clumping style grass or something like that. They're down in the ground making their nest down in there. Then we've got carpenter bees. These guys sometimes are mistaken for bumblebees because they're big like bumblebees, but they're not as fuzzy. So these are going to be, if you see a large bee, but it's not super duper fuzzy, this is probably going to be your carpenter bee, especially the abdomen. A lot of times the bumblebees are fuzzy all over. The abdomen or the butt is usually shiny, where the rest of it is usually pretty fuzzy. But it's kind of like a different type of fuzz. Like it's not as fuzzy fuzz as the bumblebees. If you see them next to each other, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's fuzzy, but it's not super duper fuzzy. They're carpenters, right? So they burrow into wood. And so you'll see them like pulling out little pieces of wood. You know, some of these bees are going to use maybe a crevice in wood that is already made by another animal, right? That's like been bored out by a beetle or something like that. These guys will actually go in and dig out the wood, dead wood themselves. The males can be territorial, but they don't have a stinger. So a lot of times you'll see the males being territorial. They'll come buzz around you. They're like, get out of my garden. This is where my female's at. But you don't have to be scared because all they can really do is like buzz around your face basically, or like hit you maybe, but they don't have a stinger, so it's okay. I love this one. This is the teddy bear one, the one to the farthest right there. That is the male valley carpenter bee, I believe, and so the females are black, but the males look like this, and a lot of people call it a teddy bear bee, and you'll see them being very territorial. You typically only see the males during mating season. A lot of times, you know, in insect colonies, once they mate, that's pretty much the end of their life cycle, right? So a lot of times you see the males only during that time of the year when they're mating. But that's one of the most striking ones that you would see. And they're big, you know, so you'll definitely know if you see this guy hanging out. All right, we're going to go on to talk about the needs of native bees. So we're going to talk about a few different categories. Bees need the same thing as us, like broadly, right? They need food, they need water, they need shelter, they need a place to raise their young, and they need safety from hazards. And I did just want to put this here to show you that in terms of the bee diversity, there's 2 different kind of types of pollen, and the bees gather different types of pollen depending on what type of bee they are. So some of them like the dry pollen, and some of them like the more moist, sticky pollen. And you can kind of see when you're looking close at a bee, you can see like this bumblebee that's carrying on its leg, it looks like one giant kind of sticky clump, right? Whereas the ones at the top, like if you see like the little ones that, like I said, store it underneath their abdomen, you can see the individual pieces of pollen. It's more dusty looking, right? So we're going to talk first about, we're going to go through like the other needs besides food, and then we'll go through food at the end because food means flowers, and we're going to go through a bunch of different types of plants that they like at the end. So water. Fresh, of course, everybody likes fresh water, right? They like it shallow though. Like she said, they can drown if it's too deep. So they really like to just lick it off of like a rock, like a wet rock, or they like to lick it off wet sand or wet dirt. They really like that also because they're getting minerals as well with it, right, from the sand or from the dirt that they're licking it off of. You can even add a very small amount of salt to the water to give them some of that mineral content that they want. And I'm talking like 1.5% or something like that salt. So a very small amount of salt. They don't want like salt water. They just, you know, just a little bit of mineral in there. But you could do like just a shallow bowl or a plate, the little things that you put underneath potted plants, you know, to capture the water. You could use something like that. Just put some sand in there. You could do something fancy like this with the little marbles or whatever, but you can also just put some rocks in there, put some sand in there, put some dirt, mud. They like that sort of thing. And of course, they prefer rainwater to treated water, but treated water is fine too. You can also, I've seen online, if any of you have a 3D printer, you can get the 3D print file. That is a little thing that will connect to a jar like that, where the jar, it'll come out and it's just shallow water at the bottom so that you can have that. All right, talking about shelter. They like thick vegetation, so let your native plants grow. Let them get big, let them get thick. They don't have to be, you know, perfectly pruned or whatever. They want a place just like us to get away from the heat, to get away from the wind, to get away from the cold, whatever it might be, the rain, that type of thing. Thick vegetation, different types of vegetation. So we're talking trees, bushes, grasses, shrubs, forbs, regular flowers, whatever you want to call them. Rock piles, stick piles, log piles, that type of thing. And trees, I mean, like a lot of them are just resting up in a large tree a lot of the times. When it comes to the plants, different ones do different things for the plants. And we're talking about the plants in terms of shelter, not necessarily plants in terms of getting pollen and nectar. Some of them nest within plants, some of them nest beneath plants. Some of them harvest the plants, like those leafcutter bees, right? Some of them harvest different types of plants to make their shelter out of. If you go to wildflower.org, that's the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, they actually have a list of native plants that specifically provide nesting material for bees and are known to be important in bee life cycles, so that's a great place to go. And I'm going to talk about a few of those plants today, but there's tons more. When it comes to those native clumping grasses, the bees might not be getting nectar or pollen from these grasses, but they're still very important to their life cycle. So we're talking these large clumping style tall grasses that grew in our prairies or grow in our prairies. Things like big bluestem, little bluestem, bushy bluestem, split-beard bluestem, all the good bluestems. These are great ones. A lot of times they'll get down in the grass area to seek shelter, but like I said, some of them will maybe build their nest up underneath it, like a bumblebee or something like that. Might dig underneath and build its nest under. If you're wanting some maybe not 5-6 foot tall grasses like the ones on the previous slide, side oats grama and hairy grama, plains love grass, Indian grass is a tall one, but that's another great option. So these are all plants that we know, we have observed bees using to seek shelter. When it comes to trees or shrubs, things like native roses, we've got several different native roses. They love those. Sagebrush, desert willow, those are all great ones for bees. And then when it comes to seeking shelter in forbs or like regular, flowering, non-woody plants, the cup plant is a good one. Yuccas. Yuccas are also another place where they seek shelter. They love thistles. So anything there in the thistle family is also something that they love to use. All right, so moving on to a place to raise young. Like we saw on the different types of bees, this is going to vary a lot depending on what type of bee it is. So if you're wanting to support multiple different types of native bees, you want to create these nesting opportunities as varied as possible, as many different ones as possible. So offer that diversity. The hollow stems, old growth, and we're going to talk about each of these individually, but these are the main categories. Those hollow stems, old growth stems, bare ground, dead wood, and just crevices in general, which can be made with a lot of different materials. And this is what it looks like a cut section. You can see that there's these cells, right, that have been made. And in those cells, you can see those balls of pollen and nectar that they have made. And then you can see all the babies in there eating that little cache of food that their mom has left them. So let's talk first about hollow stems. So if you have native plants, or some non-native plants, but of course I'm gonna promote native plants. Once the winter comes, those perennial native plants, the top above ground growth is going to die off, right? It's going to still be alive underground, and you'll start to have these dead stems. At that point, you want to leave them there. Don't cut them yet during the winter time when we get our first freeze and they've all started to turn brown. Leave them there. When it comes to early spring, you can cut them down a little bit, but don't cut them all the way down to the ground. Leave 6 inches, 8 inches, 12 inches of those stems, right? Our stuff will grow up in the spring. You'll start to get your regular plant growth. That new plant growth will kind of cover up those old stems that you've left. And then when we get to the following fall and winter, that's typically when they are then using last year's stems, because it's taken them that long to hollow out, right? You get that pithy inside. That pithy inside has come out, or, you know, decomposed, whatever, and you basically have like a straw, right? It's empty on the middle and solid around the outside. And then that's where they're laying their eggs down in there, or they're putting their, maybe they're pupating over the winter, maybe it's eggs over the winter, maybe it's an adult over the winter, or the larva. And then in the following spring, that is when they will then come out, and you'll start the whole process over again, right? And then those stems at that point, the following spring, the ones from, I guess, 2 years back at that point will probably have broken down a good amount. Things have already used them. They're gonna, you know, break down onto the ground probably, and then you'll have your ones from last year that then are gonna be used, right? So you're gonna make sure that you're keeping some of those stems for them to lay their little eggs in. Bare ground. Bare ground is so important. 70% of the species of native bees are going to nest in bare ground areas. And when I say bare ground, I'm talking not covered in leaves, not covered in vegetation, not covered in mulch, just what it sounds like, bare ground. Now, it's best to have these areas like, you know, if you, let's say you have like a particularly weedy front yard or backyard, whatever, right? And you've got some weeds growing, and then like in between there's like maybe this much space of like bare ground or something like that. That's really best, because the grass or the weeds or whatever that is growing around them is going to stabilize the soil, and just this much bare ground or patches of that much is enough for bees to go into and use. Some of them like more sandy soil, some of them like more clay soil, some of them do like to get beneath the leaf litter and you know, put their nest down in there. For the mulch, most of the time, especially if we have like a thick mulch layer, they're probably not getting underneath the thick mulch layer. Most of the ones that do this really like straight up bare ground. Then we got dead wood. Again, those carpenter bees are getting in there and they're digging it out. You can see this like pulp coming out of the hole. That's from a carpenter bee digging out its hole to put its babies down in there. But then some of them aren't going to dig themselves. Some of them are more like crevice bees, and they're just going into those holes that have already been made by some other type of animal, maybe a woodpecker, maybe a beetle, something like that. So dead wood is always great. You can see this guy over here filling up his little hole after it's put its babies in there. And then we just have crevices in general. Some of them are super opportunistic. It doesn't matter what the crevice is in. They're going to find a little crack, a little nook, a little cranny, and they're going to lay their eggs in there. And so you've probably seen where people have taken like a log and just drilled a bunch of holes in the log, right? You can do something like that if you want to have something very specific for them. But it could be in masonry. You see this one's flying into like a crack in like a brick on the side of the house or something like that. Sometimes it's in the stems, sometimes it's in wood, just any type of crevice they can get into. And you can see our cute little leaf cutter bees. They've cut their little section of leaf and they're going in there to lay that leaf in to make a little chamber. So let's talk about bee houses. You can mimic some of this stuff in a bee house, but it's always good to remember that bee houses are supplemental. Bee houses are educational because a lot of times you can see them making their nest in there. You can see when it's been filled with a bee. You can kind of watch it throughout the year, and that's great, but they're always going to be supplemental. You don't want that to replace native habitat. You just want that to be in addition to native habitat, right? And that works for anything in terms of like birds. You're trying to attract birds. Bird feeders are great, right? But bird feeders should be supplemental to having native vegetation that provides for those birds. Same thing with a hummingbird feeder or a birdhouse or whatever, you know. But they're only going to support certain bees. For instance, that 70% that like the bare ground, they're not going to get in any of this. So this is mainly those crevice dwelling bees that you're going to be supporting with your bee houses. And we have a great example over there. Some of you are at our bee house building class, so you might already have a bee house that you've built, which is great. Make sure you're keeping up with that. Make sure you're cleaning your bee house out. There can be diseases that go on in there. And of course, once the hole is full 1 year of the chambers of babies, they usually don't use it again after that, right? It's pretty much done at that point. But you want to always make sure your bee house is elevated, never on the ground. 3 to 6 feet up is best. Shelter it from the weather and rain, and make sure it's securely attached to something. You don't want it flapping around in the wind. And they like it to face the morning sun. All right, so that is a place to raise babies. Let's talk about safety from hazards. This is basically no chemicals. No pesticides, no herbicides, no insecticides, no fungicides. All those things are killing these bees, right? Away from machinery, especially some of those hive-dwelling bees like the bumblebees or like honeybees, if you run like a lawnmower right next to it, they might come out and be very angry at you. So you don't want that. They also don't like bright lights. So don't put your bee house like right next to your floodlights in your backyard or something like that, right? These are natural animals. They want the natural daylight cycle, and having that artificial light isn't beneficial to them. All right, so let's talk about food. We're going to talk about plants, basically, right? They want nectar and pollen. So a lot of times the adult bees are using the nectar, and then they're gathering the pollen and mixing that with nectar in order to create a food cache for their babies, essentially. So they're getting both, provided, of course, by flowering plants. And then a third of our bee population, a third of our species are specific. So some of them will go to any type of flower, and they'll gather pollen or whatever from any type of flower. Some of them are super specific to like a very certain plant. Some of them are more specific to, like you saw on the other slide, they like the sticky pollen versus the loose pollen or something like that. So there's varying levels of specificity that they care about depending on what it is. So in general, of course, we're talking about native Texas plants. Different bees like different plants, but in general, you want to create as much diversity as possible in your plant selection to supply pollen and nectar for the largest diversity of different types of bees. So you want at least 3 to 5 blooming plants at all times of the year in your garden. Maybe not during the winter time, because usually during the winter time, most of those bees are overwintering in some form. But you want to hit the early season, very, very early. These are animals that are, they're not warm-blooded like us. They need something to jumpstart them in those cool mornings in the early spring. So you're going to want to make sure you've got some stuff that blooms really early in the spring. You also want some stuff that blooms mid-spring, a few things that bloom during the summer, things blooming during the fall, and late into the fall until we get to our first freeze. They like bright colors, white, yellow, blue, that type of thing. Bees can see UV. So you can see some examples here. To us, like that black-eyed Susan there just looks like a yellow flower, but the bees are seeing a pattern on that, right? The bees are seeing something different than we're seeing. And there are some plants even that will change once they've been pollinated. So they might have these nectar guides on them in UV that the bees are seeing when they've got available pollen, but then once they've been pollinated, the color changes and they're not seeing these nectar guides anymore. So a lot of these nectar guides are kind of like a runway for the bees, right? It's like an arrow pointing for them saying, here you go, here it is. Here's the pollen, here's the nectar. Or a bullseye, that type of thing, right? So they're seeing a different flower than what we're seeing. Sticky, scented pollen, some of them like that more loose pollen, but a lot of them like that sticky pollen. They like flowers with a fresh scent. They can smell, and a lot of times they like that fresh scent. And then they like flowers that are shallow and have a small little tube, basically. And you'll start to see, once I start talking about the different flowers, you'll start to see, a pattern in that. You'll start to see what those flowers look like. But a lot of times those are going to be things in the aster family, a lot of things in the sage, salvia family, that type of thing. All right, so like I said, those early blooming plants are really important. So you want things that are going to start blooming in early February, right after our last freeze, basically. A lot of times this is going to be our flowering trees that you see, as well as fruit-bearing things. So a lot of things that bear fruit in terms of bushes or trees flower really early in the season and then are bearing fruit a little bit later on. So these are things like berry bushes, native fruit bearing things, right? So here's some examples of that. Agarita is a really good one. Great native, super spiky. I love a spiky plant. Redbud tree. The Chickasaw plum tree. That's another great one. Mexican plum is great too. So some of those, like I said, fruit trees, a lot of them bloom really early. It could even be something like a peach tree or an apple tree or something like that if you don't want to go with something that's native. The aromatic sumac, unassuming little flowers. They're not the most beautiful flowers, but they have a nice scent, and that you can tell that they're the small, little, shallow kind of cup thing that the bees like. And all of these are going to be blooming. These are going to be like the first things that you see in the season typically that are blooming. There are also a lot of native berry making plants. So I'm talking about natives here today. This also works for non-natives. So if you want to, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, that type of thing that aren't our native ones, they will work for bees as well. But we've got lots of beautiful native ones that do create edible berries that you can eat. So we've got smooth blackberry here, cloudberry. Cloudberry's edible, but it doesn't really taste like anything. I think that's why they call it cloudberry. If you've ever had one, it kind of tastes like a cloud. I don't know. It doesn't have that much of a taste. Black raspberry there, the thimbleberry. Those are all really, really good options for those early blooming plants. So these things can double, they can have multiple functions. Like they can be supplying the bees early in the year with this nectar and this pollen source. Then you get to eat the berries later, or perhaps the birds get to eat the berries later, whatever you want to do. All right, moving on to our regular spring blooming plants. So this is like your not super early, your regular spring blooming stuff. Of course, everybody knows about the bluebonnet. Now look at the bluebonnet. Do you see how the ones at the top have white in the middle, but the ones at the bottom have purple, pinkish in the middle? That's what I'm talking about them changing color. So those ones at the top have not been pollinated yet. The ones at the bottom have already been pollinated, right? So sometimes the flower itself will tell the bees, I've already been pollinated. I'm not offering you anything anymore. Go somewhere else. It's nice of them. I mean, at least they're not, wasting their resources. More classics, Indian blanket, Indian paintbrush, wine cup. I love the wine cup. It's beautiful. I like it because it has white pollen, so I can always see my pollinators when they've visited the wine cup. I know that they've visited it because they have white pollen on them. Something like a pink evening primrose. Sundrops are a really good one, beautiful. Yarrow, and the great news is I have some yarrow for you guys today. So after the class, if you would like, you can come over here to this table and pot up a yarrow. I've got some little yarrow plugs, and I've got some potting soil and some pots. And after the class, you are welcome to come over to this table and take a yarrow home. And they are white yarrows. So this is white yarrow too, but you can see that it can get a little pink sometimes. And so you can get a little bit of variation in that color. Milkweeds. We all know milkweeds are great for monarchs, right? Because the larvae, the caterpillars are eating them. But bees love the flowers as well. So a lot of these things can do double duty where, okay, maybe you want to attract monarchs, but you also want to support bees. Great, put some milkweeds out there. Pink evening primrose. It's blooming in the evening, it's blooming at night. So maybe you want to supply, you know, for the moths out there, right? Or maybe some bats or something like that. Great, pink evening primrose is good for the bees, good for the bats, good for the moths. All right, moving on to summer. So after spring, we're going into the summer. Gay feather's a really good one. There's tons of different liatrices, lots of different species that you can get. Most of them look pretty similar, but there's different stuff that you can get there. Buttonbush, I love the buttonbush. They get huge. I think there's some growing right out here, like just out the door here. They're not blooming right now yet, I don't think. But these things can get big. Yeah, are they outside still? Yeah, so they're right out here. You can see how big they can get. Beautiful. Just, I mean, if you have a buttonbush, just a single buttonbush, and like I said, these things get big. Once they're blooming, you will have hundreds of these flowers, and the whole thing will just be buzzing with bees. And I bet if you surveyed all those bees, you could have like 50 different types of native bees all just on one bush, because it's just, I mean, the bees just love it. It's just amazing. You can also do different types of Monarda. So there's something like Monarda fistulosa. There's the Monarda citrodora, which is the lemon mint. There's Monarda punctata. So they really like anything in the Monarda genus. Purple coneflower, another classic. Bees love it. You can see there's a bee in my photo there. And I do want to point out where you can actually see it in this purple coneflower. When we talk about small flowers that are very shallow and small little kind of cups, almost tubes. If you're looking at any type of aster, and so an aster is like a, you know, an aster is going to be a sunflower, basically, right? That type of flower, something like this. This to us looks like one flower, but that's not one flower. That's a bunch of different flowers. So there's actually two different types of flowers in it. There's the ray flowers and the disc flowers. So the ray flowers are on the outside. Each flower has one petal. And so those are the petals that you're seeing. And then each of those little kind of spiky things on the inside, those are all the disc flowers. So each of those is an individual flower. So if you're a little bee, you know, each one of those is a flower. And you can see the pollen, right, on each one of the little flowers there. And you can see how they're blooming, right? So they're blooming from the inside, or from the outside in. So the areas, those flowers on the inside haven't matured yet, and the ones on the outside are currently, you can see the ring where they are currently producing pollen. So they will continue to mature from the outside in and produce pollen in these tiny little flowers. The black dahlia, this is another one that the bees just absolutely love it. You get tons of these tiny little flowers. They're little small pea-like flowers, because this is in the legume family, the pea family. And you'll just get tons of bees, tons and tons of bees on it. It's a nice little kind of shrubby type of thing, a low-growing, like clumpy type of shrub, and the bees love it. Purple prairie clover, another dahlia. There's also Dahlia candida, which is a white prairie clover. Looks very similar, only it's white. And then something like wild indigo. So you can start to see, right, that these are all these very tiny little flowers that typically have a little tube that the bees are getting into. All right, moving on into our fall blooming plants. Fall aster is always a good one. Again, another aster. Maximilian sunflower, any type of sunflower really, another aster. Goldenrod. Beautiful, very tall, you know, and then it gets all these just tiny little yellow flowers there on the end. Same thing with the ironweed. It can get pretty tall, and then you get these clusters of tiny little purple flowers there. Partridge pea. Partridge pea is in your little packet of seeds, so you can grow some of that. There's also blue bonnets. Yeah, if you got some seeds over there. So a lot of these things I'm talking about are in the seed packet. The prairie verbena is great. Pitcher sage. I love the pitcher sage. It's so beautiful. It's tall. It's one of our, there's not that many truly blue flowers in the wild. It's hard for nature to make the color blue. And so pitcher sage, the beautiful shade of nice like sky blue that you don't see that often in nature. And then frostweed. Frostweed creates those tiny little white flowers, but frostweed is also interesting because when it goes through its first freeze, it gets these interesting frost ribbons kind of that come out of the stem. And so it creates an interesting feature when it does get below freezing. All right, so that's our full suite of plants. Some suggestions for there's tons of other plants, of course, that you could put in here, but these are ones that the bees like. You want to choose 3 to 5 of those different ones in the different kind of sections of the year. Now let's talk about bee lawn. Has anybody ever heard of a bee lawn? Apparently it's a thing. So this is you incorporate small flowering ground covers in your lawn. You can make your whole lawn the flowering ground covers, or you can just let them grow within your grass and create a lawn that is actually beneficial to the bees. So these are things like clover or vetch, right? Getting some clover to grow. Something like these little tiny thyme leaf bluets. There's some self-heal there, or something like a frog fruit or horse herb, right? And those are both also ones that will continue to bloom throughout the year. And they have these tiny flowers to us. They're unsuspecting. They might not look like the prettiest, flowers ever. But the bees really rely on them for that early season source of nectar so that they can, get some sugar in them and jumpstart their lifestyle. Herb gardens. Now, I put let them bloom because here's the thing. If you've ever grown an herb garden, you know what they tell you. Don't let them bolt, right? Don't let them bloom. A lot of times, something like lavender, of course, you're going to want to let it bloom. But something like basil, they tell you, cut off the bloom or whatever. But get your leaves off of it, get your herb use out of it for a little bit, and then let it bloom. Let it bloom for the bees. So lavender, basil, mint, thyme, you can create an herb garden that is great for the bees as well. Cilantro, yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, they love the cilantro. And then vegetable gardens too. They love the blooms of a vegetable garden. Now, if you're creating a vegetable garden, well, if you're eating the fruit of the vegetable, the true version of fruit, right? Because we all know tomatoes are really a fruit, right? Squash are really a fruit, all of that. You're going to want them to bloom, obviously, and you're going to want the bees to come, and you're going to want them to pollinate it, because otherwise you don't get fruits out of it, right? So that's always good. Tomatoes are interesting because they're typically enclosed, and they do buzz pollination. And so a lot of times the bee will come and, usually in pollination, right? The bee is getting pollen on them. They move to the next flower. Some of that pollen brushes up against the female parts of that flower. The plant gets pollinated, right? Something like tomatoes, it's enclosed in there. And so a lot of times they're getting buzz pollinated, which is basically just like the vibration of the bee or whatever insect landing on it is moving that pollen around in there and letting it do some pollination. Squash or cucumber, but something like lettuce and mustard greens, those are another thing where, people tell you, don't let it bolt, don't let it bloom, but get your lettuce off of it. Usually if you're growing lettuce, once you get to May or so, you're probably done with your lettuce, right? It's probably starting to get too hot for your lettuce. Go ahead and let it bloom. When you're done with it, let the bees have it. All right. And that's all I've got. I'll take questions if anybody has any questions, and if not, we can all go over and pot up our yarrows. Oh, Kelsey has something. Hold on.
Those online, I'll have Heather repeat this into her microphone.
Sure.
We're going to take 3 questions in the room,
Okay.
and then we're going to dismiss everyone to go work on plans.
Okay.
You can ask
Questions first.
but I would like everyone to remain seated for at least 3 questions if we have them.
Yep.
And then everyone can get talking.
Yeah.
Because it gets too loud on the microphones. So.
And if there's any online questions, we can give them some time to type in their question. Yeah. Yeah.
We can do that. But yes, if you guys have questions, please, if you could remain seated for at least 3 of them, and then I'll dismiss the class to go wild with the plans.
Okay. And I will say, check out the Xerces Society, this xerces.org. They have a great checklist that you can use to make your yard pollinator friendly, and it's really detailed, and there's some really great information in there. So I recommend going and downloading that checklist, checking it out. Okay, did you have a question?
Yeah, first I want to say about the water conservation. My daughter's job includes reading the people suffering from eminent domain losing their property so that we can water our lawns, and she says they're just depressing.
Great point. If you owned land in East Texas, how would you feel about us taking your land so that people in Fort Worth or Tarrant County can water their St. Augustine grass? You're not going to be happy, right? So, good point.
My question is, yeah, she says they're just horrible to read.
Yeah.
My question is, you mentioned all of those clumping grass. You didn't mention sedge. Is that also, I mean, it's not really a grass, but does that also serve a purpose for the bees?
You know, I'm not sure. It probably does. Probably any type of clumping grass does. You're right. Sedge isn't truly a grass, but it's grass-like, and it probably does. The ones I talked about were specifically ones that are on that Lady Bird Johnson wildflower list that people have done studies on, and that we know, we know for a fact it has been observed, but probably, you're probably safe with any clumping style grass. They're probably going to use it in some way.
Thanks.
Yeah. Question back there.
I've seen contraptions for feeding bees, so to speak, like a cup, you're supposed to put sugar water in it, it's got a shallow tray. Are those good, bad?
You can do that. Yeah. They will eat sugar water, definitely. Again, anything like that, it's okay as a supplement, right? You don't want that to be their only source of food. You want to make sure you're providing flowering plants, but that's an okay supplement. Yeah. Yeah. Just make sure you keep it fresh. Yeah, you don't want it to ferment and make alcohol. And we'll have drunk bees flying around. All right, let's see. Okay, let's take you.
Regarding water conservation,
Yes.
Tarrant Regional Water District have a position on these data farms?
Oh, good. Very good question. We'll talk about data farms. They are, so I will say, in terms of TRWD, we have all of the responsibility and none of the authority. So we cannot tell any city that they can't have a data farm. We cannot tell them that they can only use so much water. If they say we need X amount of water, it's our responsibility to provide it. So we have absolutely no say in it. It's on the city level. And a lot of times in the cities, and I won't speak for Fort Worth because I don't know about Fort Worth specifically, but a lot of times in the cities, sometimes it's not even up to the water department. It's up to the development department or whatever of the city, and they might not even talk to the water department. Yeah, sometimes they don't talk to the water department and even ask, do you have enough water for us to create this data center? So if you're concerned about that, it is a concern. And I would say that the more that residents speak out about it, the more the city has to pay attention to it.
I believe the city council is talking about it on May 15th.
Oh, good to know.
Or it might be the 12th. 15th. Okay.
All right, yeah. So go to if you're Fort Worth or any city, go to your city council meetings, and let them know how you feel about that. Because the truth is that anything that uses a lot of water, whether it be a data center or someone watering their lawn like crazy or whatever, we have to provide more water. And what that's going to mean is creating more water sources, and water prices are going to go up for everyone equally. You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to only affect, for instance, the data center. Everyone's water prices are going to go up. And so that's just how it works, unfortunately. And we don't have any authority to say yes, no, anything. Yep. Yeah, good question.
Okay, we're going to do one more, and then we'll let people ask.
Yeah, and then people can start potting their plants. Yeah, and then y'all can come up and ask. Okay, yeah, you. Let's do you.
Do bees have any natural enemies other than humans?
Yeah, I mean, birds eat bees all the time, definitely. Like anything that you can think of that eats an insect, bees can be eaten by. So sometimes something like a possum, maybe, birds, bats, anything like that. Anything that you can think of that eats insects, they can eat a bee. Yep. Yeah. But I will say probably the number one enemy is pesticides. So, yeah. Okay. So we'll go ahead and make some announcements.
Yes, if that's okay. And then all of you can absolutely come up and talk to
Yeah, y'all are welcome to come talk
while
to me
we're doing
while
our
people are potting plants.
Exactly, while we're potting plants for those who are
Yep.
here in class. So thank you. Please give a round of applause to
Thank
Heather for
you.
joining us. We want to thank you for your wonderful presentation.
Yes.
Fort Worth Water Conservation,
Open
as a
up the
department
soil.
division, we aim to reduce residential water use by 2029 is our next big achievement year. And so to achieve this goal, minimizing water loss is our main focus. And as Heather mentioned earlier, a lot of water loss occurs outside, particularly this time of year. So please help us in making your gardens, your homes, encouraging your neighbors, your HOAs, and of course notifying any commercial customers you see watering when they shouldn't be. Let them know that they really need to do their part to keep those water resources available to us. For those in class and online, you are welcome to come up. If you'd like to actually just take a picture of our QR codes of our upcoming events, I have those available for you. For those online, we have posted it into the chat already, so you can find our upcoming events there. We want to remind you that Melissa's class, first ever fully Spanish language garden class. We are so excited. Will be next Wednesday right here at the Botanic Research Institute of Texas at 6 p.m. And we would love to have you guys here. There will be so many goodies, so many giveaways. We are so excited. So please do consider joining us. Again, for those in the room, I have a QR code if you'd like to join us for free. And for those online, I've already shared Melissa's link with you. And then finally, please, if you need a good cup of coffee, a good high five, or just some good old, wonderful, clean Fort Worth water, we'd love to have you at Mental Health Monday with us over at Casa Azul. Again, our partners and our friends over at PSP and Dream Big want your week to start off on a good note. We'd love to support you guys with that by offering you some caffeine and some conservation, doing some bee watering stations, which now we all know that the bees are going to be drinking the water with their... Oh my gosh! I hope hibiscus. Yeah, I hope hope our directors get to hear that we learned something tonight. That's what we care about. So, so thank you all again. Please feel free to grab some goodies for those inside the room. For those online, if you have questions, please go ahead and post them in the chat. We'll make sure Heather gets to those and that we address them back to you via email. And thank you all again for joining us. We hope to see you next month for Rains and Drains.
Thank you.